Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 9 different players that are ready to bring the boom. 9 players that are ready to explode in 2024 fantasy football to have those breakout seasons. But before we can get on into the video, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on X or Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. And if you would like access to my half PPR and full PPR rankings and cheat sheet, they're available, link in the video description, on Patreon for $7.50. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with the first player that is ready to explode in 2024 fantasy football, and that is George Pickens, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Current aggregate ADP from ESPN Sleeper, NFL, and RT Sports have him as the wide receiver 26 at pick 57. While I was banging the metaphorical drum for George Pickens prior to Brandon Ayuk re-signing that fat extension with the San Francisco 49ers, every time I would talk about him, I had to note that, hey, there is still a chance that Brandon Ayuk gets traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which would absolutely decimate the value of George Pickens. Now, George Pickens could have still had a solid season, but having that huge top 12 season, which I believe is in the cards for George Pickens this year, would have been a lot slimmer of chances of that actually happening. So now that Brandon Ayuk is chilling on the San Francisco 49ers, we could truly give the Gawk Gawk 9000 special, metaphorically, of course, to George Pickens. Now, George Pickens did actually have over 1,000 receiving yards last year, but due to the fact that the receptions weren't really there, the touchdowns weren't really there, I don't really consider George Pickens to have broken out yet at the NFL level. Some of you may disagree, but for the parameters of today's video, I really do think that this season will be the year that everyone unanimously crowns George Pickens as being a breakout wide receiver. Last year, George Pickens' numbers were deflated like Tom Brady's balls by the fact that the quarterback situation was in disarray. The quarterback situation was an absolute steaming pile of dog shit, whether it was kissing titties Mitchell Trubisky, it was small hands Kenny Pickett, or Mason Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. Nothing was truly clicking for George Pickens, and now he gets Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Russell Wilson was named the starting quarterback of the team, but I do think about halfway into the season, Russell Wilson might be handing the baton to Justin Fields to be the starting signal caller of the team. I understand that both of those guys are far from the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but when you compare their skill set to the absolute scrubs that were throwing the ball to George Pickens last season, it is definitely a boost for George Pickens. The man had 106 targets last year, 28th at wide receiver, 6.2 per game, 63 receptions, 36th at wide receiver, 3.7 per game, 1,140 receiving yards, 67.1 per game, 16th, and 5 total touchdowns, 29th. Despite his efficiency being downright amazing, 5th in yards per target, 1st in yards per route run, 11th in yards per team pass attempt, 7th in dominator rating in an offense with Deontay Johnson. But again, the quarterback play sunk his battleship. 78th in target accuracy rating and 16th in unrealized air yards. The targets were straight trash coming from the quarterback play in Pittsburgh, and I believe that Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in tandem will be able to elevate George Pickens to potentially having a top 12 season, and I think he'll be a very reliable wide receiver too for you week in and week out. There's also a note that George Pickens is going to be a lot more versatile in his formation alignments this season. This came from minicamp, so it's an interesting tidbit of information that not everyone would know. They are talking a lot more about using him in the slot, which is where he flourished back in college. So we get the better quarterback play. We're getting easier targets in the slot more. And Deontay Johnson is now gone, chilling with short king Bryce Young in Carolina. So the wide receiver core outside of George Pickens is Van Jefferson, who has had a couple of solid games in his career. I don't want to just dig Van Jefferson a grave. Shout out The Undertaker. But ultimately, Van Jefferson hasn't really done diddly squat in his career. That would make me be completely scared off of Pickens. They've got Calvin Austin, Julian Edelman 2.0, Scotty Miller, and rookie Roman Wilson. So George Pickens has a clear stranglehold over the target share in this offense. George Pickens is a phenomenal player. We have seen it in flashes, but this season I think we're going to get a lot more consistency out of George Pickens. And shout out to the 49ers for re-signing Brandon Ayuk, because now we can fully see George Pickens explode. Boom! Shout out the Costco guys and the Rizzler. At number 2, we got Dalton Kincaid, tight end of the No One Circles the Wagons, like the Buffalo Bills. Aggregate ADP tight end 5 at pick 51. Now, if you miss out on those early tight ends that I like, and you're chilling in the middle rounds, I do really like Dalton Kincaid this season. There's a lot of question marks at the wide receiver position, right? It's kind of similar to what we were just talking about with the Steelers. They have Curtis Samuel, who is one of those guys that have 3 or 4 good games every season, and then outside of those 3 or 4 games, he's basically sleeping like fucking Snorlax, right? He is catching the Z's. He is in full-on REM sleep doing absolute jack shit. Then they have Khalil Shakira, who's had some solid games as well, but really doesn't have like the alpha play style, in my opinion, in an offense. They draft Keon Coleman, who I like at ADP, but would it shock me if Keon Coleman was a straight up bust? Not really, considering his separation just really isn't there. I think the targets will be there for him, so he'll end up being fine and have that upside. But if Dalton Kincaid cleared a path to be the clear number 2 target on the Buffalo Bills, would anyone be shocked? Dalton Kincaid is a very solid red zone threat, and that makes me very excited about him. This is going to be the season where they start off the year actually using him. Last year, they had Dawson Knox one time, if you are with me, ahead of him, until they ended up shifting the way of Dalton Kincaid. He ranked 8th in targets last year, 7th in receptions, 10th in receiving yards, but he only had 2 total touchdowns, 27th. He was 8th in true catch rate and 1st in target accuracy from the quarterback, because Josh Allen was just cooking when he was throwing Dalton Kincaid the ball. Now, Dalton Kincaid didn't have a single 20-plus point performance last season, but I don't think that means that he doesn't have that dog in him to have that huge game. He had multiple 15-plus point performances, and I think if the touchdowns start coming his way this season, which I think is a lot more likely because, again, he is a huge red zone threat, and Stephon Diggs is now in Houston with CJ Stroud, I think the path to Dalton Kincaid scoring 8-plus touchdowns is significantly higher this season. He's going to see a basis of, in my opinion, 6-plus targets every single game. He has a great quarterback in Josh Allen throwing him the ball, so I don't really think there's any reason to second guess him inside of the middle rounds of your draft, and I think he has that upside to be the tight end number 1 in fantasy football. At number 3, we got Garrett Wilson. We're staying in the AFC East with the New York Jumbo Jets, aggregate ADP wide receiver 7 at pick number 12. Now, there was a bit of a hit piece written yesterday about Aaron Rodgers, talking about all types of things like Aaron Rodgers isn't a real leader, Aaron Rodgers this, Aaron Rodgers that, the locker room is in fucking disarray. Frankly, I'm not really worried about that at all, based upon all of the videos I've seen, based upon how the beat reporters talk about Aaron Rodgers. He is going to be perfectly fine. Now, we've talked about this a bunch on the channel whenever we talk about Garrett Wilson or Breece Hall, that, in my opinion, Aaron Rodgers doesn't need to hop in a hot tub time machine and go back a couple of years ago to where he was the back-to-back MVP. He doesn't need to play that well to elevate Garrett Wilson, because Garrett Wilson is the clear number 1 wide receiver on this team and was able to put up decent numbers last year with Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian. Now, he was never really able to jump up, do a 360 windmill dunk, and slam it over a mascot like he was Zach LaVine. Was it Zach LaVine who did it? Was it Aaron Gordon? I don't fucking remember. I'm not an NBA historian. That's why we talk about football, of course. But Garrett Wilson was having some solid goings with bad quarterback play. Now, had Aaron Rodgers not have gotten hurt last season, no one's questioning Garrett Wilson here as a first round pick, a late first round, or an early second round pick. The reason why people have question marks is because is Aaron Rodgers going to be healthy? This, that, and the other thing. He looks fully healthy to me. He's immunized, of course. And is Garrett Wilson really that good? Now, if you watch the fucking tape from last year, you'd say that the guy's amazing. The problem is he just didn't really get enough touchdowns, and the target accuracy was straight cheeks, straight up ass. Shout out Lisa Ann. 76th in target accuracy, but he was top 12 in total route wins, 4th in targets, though just 13th in receptions, 22nd in receiving yards, and just 3 total touchdowns, 58th. He was averaging damn near 10 fucking targets per game. Now, Garrett Wilson, I don't think is going to average 10 targets per game this season, but we saw it last year, so it is definitely possible. I think the Jets offense is going to be very solid at moving the ball up and down the field, and I think Garrett Wilson has some solid touchdown upside, with him having the upside of also being a top 5 target at the wide receiver position. To me, Garrett Wilson seems like a no-brainer pick inside the first round, or in the early second round if he falls that way. Again, try not to overthink things with Garrett Wilson. Try not to get in your own head thinking about Aaron Rodgers and thinking about how Aaron Rodgers is really going to sell this team up the river or something like that. From everything I have seen in terms of video clips from training camp, from everything that I've read from the beat reporters, Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers are on the exact same page. They have an amazing connection. It's not like Derek Carr and Chris Olave last year, where Derek Carr would throw the ball and Chris Olave is just nowhere near the ball, or Chris Olave would be butt booty naked, wide open, running. There's no one around him within a school zone of him, and the ball just doesn't come his way, or it hits him in the fucking helmet, or he misses him by 8,000 yards. It feels like Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers are on the same page, and assuming that they are, there could be a top 5, top 3 season in the potential here for Garrett Wilson. So I love him, again, in the late first or the early second round, and this will truly be his breakout year because, again, the quarterback play was weighing him down. At number 4, we got James Cook staying in the AFC East, back with another Buffalo Bill. Aggregate ADP running back 13 at pick 29. James Cook last year was the running back 19 in PPR points per game, but you could very clearly see a strong difference from the first offensive coordinator to the second offensive coordinator. Once they fired their offensive coordinator, it was like James Cook's whole world got flipped upside down, like he was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Everything changed once they changed offensive coordinators because they started to involve James Cook at a much higher rate, which led to him having a lot more production. Now, the biggest thing that's been holding James Cook back is the touchdowns. He's a very proficient pass catcher. He's able to do a lot with his carries, but he's never really been able to find pay dirt. He only scored 6 total touchdowns last year, ranking 24th, despite the fact that he was 5th in yards per touch, 12th in true yards per carry, and 3rd in expected points added. The touchdowns are going to get vultured at points by Josh Allen, because Josh Allen could basically just take off from the 5-yard line, have 3 dudes hang on to him, and he'll just keep stepping on into the end zone like there's 5 preschoolers jumping on him, and he'll walk directly into the end zone, or he'll see you running at him, and he'll lower his helmet, and he'll knock your bitch ass to Azkaban, okay? For sure, that's going to happen. Josh Allen scored 15 rushing touchdowns last season. I think that number is going down, but I could see him getting 10-plus rushing touchdowns again. Either way, though, I think they are going to look to implement James Cook a lot more on the goal line, a lot more in the red zone, and I just don't really suspect that he's going to get iced out 2 years in a row in terms of touchdowns. If he could just score 10-plus touchdowns, he has a whole lot of upside. Again, this is a guy that is very proficient in the pass-catching game, which is very important for fantasy football. He had 54 targets, 44 receptions. Is he prime Austin Eckler? Is he Christian McCaffrey? Of course not, but if they do uptick the targets, if he gets, say, 70 targets this year instead of 55, that could pay off dividends for James Cook. The Buffalo Bills as a whole are a pretty hard team to talk about because they seem very polarizing. It doesn't really seem like anyone's kind of in the middle like Malcolm, right? Where you're chilling in the middle, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe the Buffalo Bills aren't the same without Stephon Diggs, but they're probably still going to be good, right? It's either the Buffalo Bills are still great. The Buffalo Bills own the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills are going to win the fucking Super Bowl. Or the Buffalo Bills suck donkey cock and are not going to be able to do anything without Stephon Diggs. It's one or the other. I'm more in the middle. I like the upside of James Cook and this Buffalo Bills offense. I have seen a lot as a Dolphins fan just getting my teeth kicked in by the Buffalo Bills my whole entire life, or at least what feels like the last 5-6 years. But James Cook, phenomenal player. Wish he wasn't on the Bills as a Dolphins fan, but I definitely like him at ADP, especially since you don't even have to draft him in the first 2 rounds. At number 5, we got my guy Drizzy Drake London, wide receiver of the hot Atlanta Falcons. Aggregate ADP wide receiver 11 at pick 23. Now, Drake London, for the start of his career, has been another guy that has fallen victim to quarterback play and victim to the play calling by that absolute bum Arthur Smith. Now, I know Arthur Smith is now the offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers, which will scare some people away from George Pickens, who we talked about earlier. But ultimately, there's stuff to be blamed for the coaching. There's also stuff to be blamed about the quarterback play. Now the quarterback play is significantly better in Atlanta, going from Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, the guys that have been throwing the ball to London, to Kirk Cousins. Now, Kirk Cousins also coming off of a serious injury, but everything is pointing towards Kirk Cousins being just fine. And Kirk Cousins has been elevating wide receivers to top 12 finishes for fucking years. Back in Washington with the Redskins, he was able to do it with guys like Pierre Garçon. He's done it with Justin Jefferson, obviously, more recently. Drake London is a fantastic talent, again, who has just been drugged to the deep depths of the earth by the quarterback play. I get in terms of drafting a guy inside of the 2nd round, he might not feel like the safest pick ever, right? And as a whole, outside of the running backs going in the 2nd round, the 2nd round feels very dicey compared to what we're used to in the past couple of seasons. The 2nd round feels like there's a whole bunch of risks and landmines you could be stepping on, and it's not that cool explosion, the fireworks like the fucking 4th of July, or the fireworks coming out the titties of Katy Perry in that theme song. Very nice, I like. But more of an explosion, like your leg is getting blown off, and then you're gonna have a stump coming for your bottom leg, right? You're gonna have a peg leg like you are Patchy the Pirate. So while the 2nd round does feel kind of risky in terms of the wide receivers, Drake London has all of the talent. Again, while the statistics, you check the statistics, they're not very good, right? Last year, 109 targets, 69 receptions. Shout out Borat. Very nice. I like 905 receiving yards, 2 fucking touchdowns, right? And you might have bought into him last year. I kind of did as well because the talent, I thought, hey, the quarterback play wouldn't really matter too much. They'll figure it out. And then ultimately, you end up with your head down the toilet and they're fucking giving you a swirly, right? But this season, you ain't ending up in the toilet. You're going to end up with a guy that has top 5 upside. Kirk Cousins should be good to go. I'm not really too worried about him. I think Drake London's the clear number 1 target on this team, and I think the Atlanta Falcons are going to be very, very good this season, and a lot of people are going to skip out on Drake London because of what's happened in the past. It's the exact same thing with Garrett Wilson. At number 6, we got Javonte Williams, running back of the Denver Broncos. Aggregate ADP running back 27 at pick 81. Now, Javonte Williams has been a guy we've talked about a bunch recently on the channel, so I won't try to sit here and fondle his balls for a crazy amount of time. We're just going to talk about him in brief. But if you don't know too much about Javonte Williams, if you had drafted him last year, which I said was a big no-no to Kembe, no-no-no, Javonte Williams was coming off of a torn ACL, and he ended up having a not-so-hot season. He was the running back, 33 in PPR points per game, playing in 16 games, though, but he was just returning off of the ACL. Now, we are 18-plus months removed from the ACL injury, and that is going to lead to Javonte Williams looking a lot better. All the reports out of training camp were that Javonte Williams looks like his old self. And while Javonte Williams never really, in my opinion, lived up to the the sky high, like that film. That's an amazing film if you've never seen that. The sky high expectations that were put on him coming into the NFL draft, coming into the NFL, he is still a very, very, very talented player. Audric Estime is behind him, as is Jaleel McLaughlin. I think Jaleel McLaughlin's going to steal a couple of targets. But Javonte Williams, coming off of a freshly torn ACL, had 58 targets last season, and Sean McVay is notorious for heavily targeting the running back position. Bo Nix should be relatively solid. I don't really see Bo Nix in his rookie year completely doing a 180 with people's heads, right? Like you're in The Exorcist or something, right? Where Javonte Williams is going to completely, or not Javonte Williams, where Bo Nix is going to completely change the game for the Broncos in year one. He's going to lead them to a playoff push or something. Probably not, right? But I do think Bo Nix is competent enough to, if Javonte Williams is able to stay fully healthy, he's able to get the targets, he's getting a bunch of carries. The guy was getting 13 plus carries a game coming straight off the ACL tear, so we know Sean Payton heavily believes in him. Again, Jaleel McLaughlin's going to be involved, but Javonte Williams is a much better back than Jaleel, and all-around back. Last year, the efficiency was so bad last year for Javonte. He was 50, 30 yards per touch, 59th in true yards per carry, but he was averaging the 5th most defenders in the box, which I don't really see being the case as much this season. I just think Javonte Williams is a very talented guy, and where you're drafting him, he's a guy that should be a pretty reliable running back too for you with that top 12 upside in plus matchups. I think Javonte Williams has that league winner upside, especially if the targets really do come pouring his way. At number 7, we got Jayden Riley-Reed, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers, aggregate ADP, wide receiver 36 at pick 82. But before we talk about Jayden Reed and the rest of the players here that are ready to explode, kaboom, we got to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor over on Underdog Fantasy. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy, and sign up using code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description to claim your free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. If you don't know what Underdog Fantasy is, they're the best place to play best ball in the whole entire universe. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that's it. There's no waivers, no trades, and no in-season management. Underdog's staple contest, their main contest, $25 to enter Best Ball Mania 5 with a $1.5 million prize to first place. If you are new to Underdog Fantasy, again, make sure you sign up using the promo code Notorious to claim your free pick plus the first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy's drafts are a great way to practice for your home league. And maybe you're already done with your home leagues, you're just watching this video for fun. Go ahead and draft some of these players on there. And even if you haven't done your fantasy drafts yet, you know, you guys are watching this video for a reason, you can just add some extra drafts on there. So again, make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy. Link in the video description. So back to Jayden Reed here. Jayden Reed is a guy that very much excites me this season. Pause. Jayden Reed was a top 26 wide receiver last year in terms of PPR points per game in his rookie season. 16 games played last year, 40th in targets with 94, 64 receptions, 793 receiving yards, but he had 10 total touchdowns, 5th at wide receiver. His efficiency stats make me erotic. It was 5th in fantasy points per target, 8th in fantasy points per route run, 36th in target accuracy from Jordan Love, 22nd in route win rate, and he is 4th in fantasy points per touch for rookies over the last decade, ranking with absolute phenoms at the wide receiver position like Odell, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, some guys you may have heard of before. Now, do I think that Jayden Reed ultimately is like the same level as Justin Jefferson? Probably not, right? But I do think those efficiency stats really do tell you how good of a player Jayden Reed is. I think he's the clear slot wide receiver in the Green Bay Packers offense with a quarterback in Jordan Love who possesses a wide skill set. Jordan Love, to me, has the upside of being a top 5 quarterback in the NFL this season. Now, Jayden Reed, the biggest complication with him is just the fact that they have a pretty loaded wide receiver core. Now, obviously, it's not like they have Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Chad Ochocinco out there, but Jayden Reed, Christian Watson, they have Dontavian John Wicks, right? Bo Melton, they have Romeo Doubs. They have a lot of talented wide receivers to the Packers' disposal, but if Jayden Reed ends up being the #1 guy, that is a risk I'm willing to take as the wide receiver 36 off the board at pick 82. Again, the efficiency stats are mouth-watering. The touchdown numbers were amazing, and I don't expect the Green Bay Packers offense to fall off the edge of the earth. I think they're going to be a very proficient offense yet again, and if Jayden Reed is in the driver's seat as the wide receiver number 1, he has that very reliable top 24 wide receiver weekly upside, with also having that potential to pop one off and having a top 10 performance, again, because of how great this offense and the play calling is by Mr. Matt LaFleur. At number 8, we got Brian Thomas. Now, I'm sorry if you've heard me talk up Brian Thomas Jr. a ton recently, but not everyone that watches the videos watches every video. Some of you guys, this might be the first time hearing me yap. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. But Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars, aggregate ADP wide receiver 49 at pick 119. This dude is a steal at ADP. It is like robbing a bank with Lester from GTA. Pick 23 in the 2024 NFL Draft. Last year at LSU with Malik Neighbors as well as Jayden Daniels. He played in 13 games as a 21-year-old, 68 receptions on 89 targets for 1,177 yards, 17.3 yards per reception with 17 receiving touchdowns, and a 21.9% target share in the LSU offense. In terms of workout metrics, they just jump off the page. 98th percentile 40-yard dash, 98th percentile speed score, according to Player Profiler, 98th percentile catch radius, and 83rd percentile burst score. The beat reporters have been just loving Brian Thomas Jr. The coaches as well, talking about how he's getting better and better, that he is so much better than just a couple of weeks ago where he was already looking good. He's made a bunch of highlight plays in preseason. And while I do believe that Christian Kirk is the numero uno, the number 1 option on the Jaguars offense, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I see the upside that Brian Thomas Jr. might even be able to overtake him. Gabe Davis can't even hold the jockstrap of Brian Thomas or Christian Kirk. Gabe Davis will have like 2 good games, right? If you drafted him on Underdog Fantasy, he might have at ADP those solid 2-3 games. Maybe he's the reason why you win, because he has that huge game in the championship in week 17. But Brian Thomas Jr., I think, is going to be very, very reliable on this team. People are really forgetting that the Jacksonville Jaguars were on top of the world, basically, for a majority of last season, and then they had a dramatic fall off, right? They were really at the apex of the AFC. They were looking down on the Chiefs. They were dancing on teams' graves, doing the Irish jig, tap dancing on that ass, and then, obviously, they fell. They kerplunked. It was like in high school. I don't know if you guys ever had to do this. In one of our science classes, we had to figure out how to make an egg fall from like the roof of a building and not break, right? Like Humpty Dumpty off the wall. And Brian Thomas Jr., or not Brian Thomas Jr., the Jaguars, they had no protection. There was no Trojans around them. They had nothing. They had no plan. Egg straight on the ground, exploded. They missed the playoffs. Everything goes wrong. But if Trevor Lawrence is able to stay healthy with how much hype Brian Thomas Jr. has got, with how solid Brian Thomas Jr.'s tape is at LSU, me likey some Brian Thomas Jr., especially at ADP. At number 9, we got another rookie, and we got the lad. Now, I actually like Brian Thomas Jr. more than lad, and you can get him 20 picks later, so a lot of the time, I'll probably just end up with Brian Thomas Jr., but I figured I should mention lad since we really haven't talked about him too much. Now, lad is another guy that at ADP feels pretty solid to me. He feels like a pretty cozy click. Now, I do think Joshua Palmer could end up as the number 1 receiver on this team, and that will lead to Ladd McConkey probably busting in a lot of games, because I don't feel like the Chargers, I don't think anyone with their brain screwed on correctly really thinks that this Chargers offense can be super pass heavy. While they have Justin Herbert, who is a very phenomenal quarterback, when you have Jim Harbaugh, when you basically, everyone's saying they bring in Greg Roman, this is going to be a run-heavy offense. Instead of drafting a wide receiver, they bolster up the offensive line. They've got guys like Quentin Johnston fucking rolling out there. So it's far from the ideal situation for the passing attack there. But Ladd McConkey was drafted early in the 2nd round. He was picked 34 in the 2024 NFL Draft. He only played in 9 games last season with Georgia due to missing multiple games with a back injury. But in those 9 games, he had 30 receptions for 748 yards with 2 touchdowns. In 2022, when he played a fuller season, 15 games played, 58 receptions on 76 targets for 726 yards, 13.1 yards per reception, and 7 touchdowns. The dude ran a 4.39 40-yard dash, which in case you didn't know is very fast, right? We just talked about how Brian Thomas ran a 4.33. Ladd McConkey, slightly slower, 4.39. We all know, though, Ladd McConkey, a real lunch pail guy, first guy in, last guy out. And I think he has the ability to lead the team in terms of targets, be that slot guy that's getting all the easy targets from Justin Herbert, the pervert. Now, Ladd McConkey is probably the guy on this list that I'm the least confident in due to the fact that Joshua Palmer has shown it off at the NFL level before. When Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were hurt last season, he was able to flourish like a beautiful butterfly. But I do think Ladd McConkey could push him to the side and become the #1 guy in this offense with some very reliable upside. Because again, if he's just the clear #1 target, that you're getting a pick 97, close to pick 100. Sometimes you get him even later than that. Ladd McConkey feels pretty good. Pause. So I like Ladd McConkey a lot as the pick 97. But again, in a vacuum, like if you could just have one or the other at ADP, I would definitely rather lean with Brian Thomas. Because again, he goes like 20 plus picks later. And I think the Jaguars offense is just going to be a lot better than the Chargers offense. But you don't necessarily need to be on the best offense ever to have huge seasons. We have seen that a gazillion times in the past. Thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you didn't enjoy, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button like it owes you some money. While you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you guys leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out the Patreon link in the video description. Check out Underdog Fantasy, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Click on one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. Love you guys all so much, and we're so close to week #1. Have a great one. Shout out Wayne Gretzky. Good boy.